I broke up with him just to see if he'd fight for me. He didn't even ask why. He just walked away. Honestly, I'm still not over it. I'm Samantha, 26, and this whole mess started about 6 months ago when I decided to test my boyfriend's love for me. Real smart move, right? Donovan and I had been together for a year and a half and things were getting pretty serious. We'd met each other's families, spent holidays together, and were even talking about moving in together. His parents absolutely adored me. His mom would always text me recipes, and his dad would save me the last piece of pie at dinner. His little sister basically treated me like the big sister she never had. I really thought we were building something real. But here's the thing about relationships. Sometimes they get too comfortable. We had our routines, our favorite takeout spots, our weekend traditions. It was nice, but where was the passion, the grand gestures? All my friends were posting stories about how their boyfriends surprised them with weekend getaways, wrote them songs, or fought to win them back after arguments. Meanwhile, Donovan was just reliable and steady. He showed up when he said he would, remembered my birthday, and got along well with my friends. But I started wondering, would he actually fight for me if he had to? I'd scroll through social media and see couples having dramatic reconciliations after fights, and something inside me got jealous. How do you know someone really loves you unless they have to prove it? Donovan never had to prove it because I never really pushed him. He had it too easy with me. That's what I started thinking, and once that thought took root, I couldn't shake it. So one random Tuesday evening, after a perfectly normal weekend together, nothing special but nothing bad either, I decided to make my move. I figured the unexpectedness of it would show him how serious I was and how seriously he needed to fight for me. I rehearsed my speech, practiced looking sad but determined in the mirror, and invited him over. I was about to find out exactly how much Donovan really loved me, or so I thought. When Donovan arrived at my apartment, he looked relaxed, completely unaware of what was coming. He leaned in to kiss me hello like always, but I turned my face, so he kissed my cheek instead. I saw confusion flash across his face. Good, I thought. He's already sensing something's wrong. This is going to work perfectly. Donovan, I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, I said, trying to sound somber and definitive. I just don't think this is working anymore. I want to break up. I paused, waiting for the shock, the questions, the protests. In my head, he was supposed to look stunned, maybe tear up a little. He'd ask what went wrong, tell me how much he loved me, insist we could work through whatever was bothering me. But that's not what happened. Donovan just looked at me for a long moment, his expression shifting from surprise to something else, something calm and almost resigned. Then he said, "Okay, just that, okay." Like when I told him I didn't want Italian for dinner. I stared at him, waiting for more, but he just sat there, processing. No tears, no begging, no questions about why, just quiet acceptance. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't the script I'd written in my head at all. That's it? I finally asked, unable to hide my disbelief. He shrugged, looking a little confused by my reaction. Well, if that's how you feel, I'm not going to try to change your mind. I respect your decision. Respect my decision? Who asked for respect? I wanted passion. I wanted him to fight for me. I felt my cheeks burn as anger and embarrassment rushed through me. This was not how this was supposed to go at all. So you're just gonna walk away, just like that, after a year and a half together? I meant that little to you? Now he looked genuinely confused. I don't understand. You just said you wanted to break up. I'm trying to respect that. You're supposed to fight for me, I finally blurted out, too frustrated to keep pretending. You're supposed to care enough to at least ask why or try to change my mind. His expression changed then, a flicker of hurt, realization, disappointment, all crossing his face at once. Wait, was this some kind of test? I couldn't admit it outright. No, I just thought if you really loved me, you'd at least want to know what went wrong instead of just accepting it without a word. Donovan stood up slowly, running a hand through his hair. Samantha, relationships don't work like that. You can't just say you want to break up when you don't mean it and expect me to somehow read your mind. I think I should go, he said quietly after a moment. I'll box up anything of yours that's still at my place. You can come get it, or I can drop it off. That's when I really panicked. He was actually going to leave. So that's it? You're just going to walk away after everything we've been through? Donovan paused at the door and looked back at me. You said you wanted to break up. I'm respecting your decision. What else am I supposed to do? You're a cold-hearted jerk who was just using me this whole time, I shouted, desperate to get any kind of emotion from him. You never really loved me at all. He just shook his head. I'm not going to do this, Samantha. When you're ready to have an honest conversation, let me know. But I don't play games. And then he left. He actually left. No tears, no begging, no grand gestures. He just walked away like I hadn't just blown up our entire relationship. I spent that night bouncing between crying and fuming, waiting for a call or a text that never came. By morning, I was convinced his reaction just proved what I'd suspected all along. He didn't love me enough. A man who truly loved a woman would never let her go that easily, right? The next few days were a blur of checking my phone, jumping every time it buzzed, only to feel disappointed when it wasn't him. I started wondering if maybe I'd made a huge mistake. But my pride wouldn't let me admit it. Not yet. 3 days after our breakup, I got a text from Donovan's sister asking what had happened. Apparently, he told his family we were over, but hadn't given them many details. His mom was upset. She'd really liked me. Great, I thought. Now his whole family probably thinks I'm the bad guy. I needed to get control of the narrative fast. The morning after our breakup, I was already spinning the story to my friends. He just didn't care enough to even ask why. I told my best friend Alyssa over coffee. Can you believe that? I tell him I want to break up, and he just says okay and leaves. No questions, no nothing. Alyssa frowned, stirring her latte. Wait, so you wanted to break up with him, but you're upset that he accepted it? I rolled my eyes. It's not about that. It's about the principle. If he really loved me, he would have at least wanted to know why or tried to fix things. As the days passed, I carefully shaped my version of events for different people. To his sister, I said there had been problems brewing for a while. To mutual friends, I hinted that Donovan had been emotionally distant. To co-workers, I shrugged and said, sometimes things just don't work out. Every time, I made myself look like the reasonable one who had tried to save the relationship while making Donovan seem cold and detached. But not everyone bought my story. His sister Megan called me a week later. I talked to Donovan, she said bluntly. My stomach dropped. I don't know what he told you, but he said you broke up with him as some kind of test to see if he'd fight for you. Is that true? I could hear the disbelief in her voice. That's not. He's twisting what happened. I sputtered. Stop lying, Samantha, Megan said, her voice harder than I'd ever heard it. Do you have any idea how manipulative that is? To end a relationship you don't actually want to end just to see what he'd do? That's messed up. She hung up before I could defend myself. I stared at my phone, furious. How dare she talk to me like that? And how dare Donovan tell her the truth instead of sticking to my version? In a rush of spite, I posted a vague but dramatic status on social media. Sometimes the people you think care about you the most are the first to walk away when things get tough. The likes and sympathetic comments started pouring in. You deserve better. His loss. This was more like it, the validation I needed, but not everyone was fooled. My old college roommate, Jade, who'd always been painfully honest, texted me privately. Did you actually want to break up with him, or was this some kind of test? It's not wrong to want someone to fight for you, I shot back, defensive. No, but it's wrong to manipulate someone like that, she replied. If you wanted more romance or reassurance, you should have just told him. Days turned into weeks with no word from Donovan. No calls, no texts, no knocking at my door with flowers. He wasn't going to come back. He wasn't going to beg. I'd broken up with him, and he'd simply respected it and moved on. That's when the panic really set in. I might have actually lost him for good, all over a stupid test that anyone could see right through. What was I thinking? But I still couldn't bring myself to reach out and admit my mistake. My pride wouldn't let me. So instead, I doubled down on my social media posts, hoping that if I played the heartbroken victim well enough, maybe somehow it would fix what I'd done. I kept posting photos of nights out with friends, new outfits, fancy drinks, all carefully curated to show Donovan, who I knew still followed me, that I was living my best life without him. In reality, I was checking his profiles obsessively, looking for any sign that he was miserable without me. But his posts stayed frustratingly normal. Updates about work, a hiking trip with friends, photos of a new dish he'd cooked, no sad songs, no emotional quotes, nothing to show he was hurting. 1 month after our breakup, I still hadn't heard from him directly. I'd run into a few mutual friends and their updates made me furious. He seems good, they'd say. Or worse, he asked about you, hopes you're doing well. Hopes I'm doing well? He should be devastated. That's when I decided it was time to engineer a chance encounter. I knew his routine, where he got coffee on Saturday mornings, which grocery store he preferred, his favorite bookstore. I started showing up at these places dressed to impress, hoping we'd bump into each other. After 3 tries, it finally worked. I spotted him at the local farmer's market, picking out apples at a produce stand. My heart raced as I walked up, trying to look casual. Donovan! What a surprise, I said, pretending to be shocked. He looked up, momentarily startled. Samantha, hi, how have you been? I asked, stepping closer. I'm okay, he said, with a small nod. You? Oh, keeping busy, I said with a light laugh. Listen, I think we should talk about what happened. It was just a big misunderstanding. Donovan raised an eyebrow. A misunderstanding? I nodded eagerly. Yes, I didn't really want to break up. I was just going through something, having a bad day, you know how it is. So you didn't mean it when you said you wanted to end our relationship? He asked, his voice calm but distant. Not really, I admitted, sensing he might give in. I was just testing you, I guess, seeing if you'd fight for me. Something in his expression changed then, His eyes hardened a little, his jaw tightened. "I've been seeing a therapist these past few weeks," he said, catching me off guard, "talking about our relationship, about patterns I hadn't noticed before." "You're in therapy because of our breakup?" I asked, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe he really was heartbroken. "Not exactly," he said. "I'm in therapy because I realized I have a pattern of being with women who test me instead of communicating, who expect me to read their minds, who create problems so I can prove my devotion. When you broke up with me as a test, it was like a wake-up call. I saw how unhealthy it had become, how I was always guessing what you really wanted instead of you just telling me. I respect myself too much now to go back to that." "It wasn't a game," I protested, my voice small. "I just needed to know you cared." "By hurting both of us?" he asked. "That's not love, Samantha. That's insecurity." I felt tears burn in my eyes. "So you're saying there's no chance for us?" Donovan sighed. "I'm saying I need someone who says what they mean and means what they say, who doesn't use breaking up as a way to manipulate feelings." "I'm not that guy anymore." He paid for his apples, looked at me one last time, wished me well, and walked away again, only this time it felt final. I stood there in the middle of the busy weekend market, surrounded by people and laughter, feeling more alone than ever. I stood there among the weekend shoppers, feeling oddly hollow. He'd changed somehow in those weeks apart, more certain, more grounded, while I was still stuck playing the same games and expecting different results. For the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I was the problem. But that moment of self-awareness didn't last. As I walked home alone, I convinced myself that Donovan was being unreasonable. So I'd made one mistake. Was he really going to throw away everything we had over it? If he really loved me, he would forgive me, right? That thinking sent me into a downward spiral that took over the next several weeks of my life. I became obsessed with getting Donovan back, not because I'd truly learned anything from what I'd done, but because his rejection only made me want him more. The fact that he was moving on while I felt stuck made me frantic. I started texting him more often, casual at first, then more desperate. His replies grew shorter and less frequent, until finally he asked me, directly, to give him space, but I couldn't. I convinced myself that if I just showed him how persistent I was, how much I cared, he'd have to take me back. I read endless articles about winning back an ex, joined online forums where people shared success stories of reconciliation, even bought a book called Make Him Come Crawling Back. My friends began to distance themselves because all I talked about was Donovan and my plans to fix things. My work suffered too. I was late 3 times in 1 week because I'd stayed up all night stalking his social media and then slept through my alarm. Then came the breaking point. I heard through a mutual friend that Donovan had been promoted at work, something he'd been working toward back when we were together. In my twisted logic, I decided it was the perfect chance to see him. I would show up and remind him what he was missing. So I went to his workplace near closing time with a small gift and a card. I wore his favorite dress on me and spent hours on my hair and makeup. I was sure he'd see me and remember how much we had. When he walked out of the building and saw me waiting, his face didn't light up. Instead, he looked wary, almost resigned. "Samantha, what are you doing here?" he asked. glancing around uncomfortably as his colleagues walked by. I heard about your promotion, I said brightly, holding out the gift. I wanted to congratulate you in person. This isn't appropriate, he said quietly. I asked you to give me space, but I'm just being friendly, I insisted, feeling panic rise in my chest as I realized this wasn't going how I'd imagined. We can still be friends, right? No, Samantha, we can't. Not right now, he said, his tone firm. A few of his co-workers slowed their steps, clearly trying to listen. Embarrassment and anger bubbled up inside me. Fine, I snapped, my voice louder than I meant. Keep acting like you're so perfect, like you never made any mistakes in our relationship. Donovan's jaw tightened. I'm going to go now, he said, his voice controlled but strained. Please don't come to my workplace again. As he walked toward the parking lot, something inside me snapped. I followed him, my words spilling out louder than ever. You think you're too good for me now, huh, with your fancy promotion? You wouldn't even have applied for that job if I hadn't encouraged you. He turned around, and for the first time, I saw real anger in his eyes. Stop, now. A small crowd of his colleagues had gathered, watching this humiliating scene unfold. One woman stepped forward and asked, Should I call security, Donovan? The weight of what I'd become hit me all at once, the crazy ex making a scene in public. I felt sick. The gift slipped from my hands and hit the pavement. I turned and hurried away, tears blurring my vision as I fled. Streaming down my face, the tears wouldn't stop. Later that night, I got a text from Donovan. Don't contact me again. If you do, I'll have to take more formal steps to enforce that boundary. He was basically threatening me with a restraining order. Me, the woman he'd once said he loved just a few months ago. It was too much. I shut myself in my apartment the whole weekend, ignoring calls from worried friends, eating ice cream straight out of the tub, watching sad romantic movies where the guy always comes back in the end. But by Sunday evening, a cold truth settled in my gut. Donovan wasn't coming back, and maybe, just maybe, this whole mess was more my fault than I wanted to admit. 6 months after our breakup, I got invited to a housewarming party thrown by mutual friends. I knew there was a chance Donovan might be there, but I'd avoided social events for so long that I decided to risk it. Besides, I look good these days. I'd lost weight, mostly from stress, and bought a new outfit just for moments like this, when I might run into him. I arrived fashionably late, hoping my entrance would be noticed. Taylor, the host, greeted me warmly and led me to the drinks table. As I scanned the room, that's when I saw him, Donovan, standing by the window, laughing at something someone said. But it wasn't just anyone. It was a woman I didn't recognize, pretty in that effortless way, her smile genuine and warm. Who's that? I asked Taylor, trying to sound casual. Oh, that's Donovan's girlfriend, Rachel, Taylor said. They've been dating for a couple months now. She's really cool, you'll like her. The room seemed to tilt. Girlfriend? He had a girlfriend already. I downed my drink in one gulp and immediately poured another. All evening, I watched them together from across the room, the way he looked at her, the way his hand rested on the small of her back, the way she made him laugh that real, if open laugh I recognized from when things were good with us. The worst part wasn't that he'd moved on, it was how healthy they looked. There was none of the drama that had defined our relationship. They communicated easily, checking in with each other without seeming clingy. When she spoke, he really listened. They're good together, aren't they? a voice said beside me. I turned to find Megan, Donovan's sister, watching me with a knowing look. I guess, I said, trying to sound indifferent. He's happy, she said. Happier than I've seen him in a long time. The implication stung. Happier than when he was with me. Good for him, I said tightly. Megan sipped her drink. You know, the whole story came out about why you two really broke up. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Your test, she said. How you broke up with him just to see if he'd fight for you. I mentioned it to Taylor months ago, and you know how fast news travels in this group. Horror washed over me as I realized why some people at the party had been giving me sideways looks. They all knew. I was the toxic ex who played mind games. That's not exactly how it happened, I started, but Megan cut me off. Save it, she said sharply. I'm just telling you so you understand why some doors are permanently closed to you now. She walked away, leaving me standing there, gripping my drink like a lifeline. Across the room, Donovan and Rachel were saying their goodbyes. He hadn't said a single word to me all night, hadn't even acknowledged I was there. As they passed close by on their way out, Rachel gave me a polite smile. She had no idea who I was. Then Donovan's eyes met mine for the briefest second. There was no anger there, no resentment, not even a trace of what we'd once been. There was nothing in his eyes, no anger, no sadness, just complete indifference. I had become a stranger to him. That night marked the beginning of my slow social exile. Invitations from friends started to dry up, and people always seemed busy when I suggested meeting up. The story of my manipulation had made the rounds, locking in my reputation as someone who couldn't be trusted in a relationship. At work, it turned out my habit of deception reached further than I'd realized, taking credit for other people's ideas, spinning stories to make myself look better. My manager finally called me out during a performance review. There's a concerning pattern here, she said. This needs to stop, or we'll have to reconsider your position with us. A week later, I ran into Alyssa at a coffee shop. I hadn't seen her in months. She'd been one of the first to pull away after the party. How are you? I asked, genuinely hoping to reconnect. Busy, she said shortly, not meeting my eyes. Look, I should go. Wait, I blurted, suddenly desperate. Have you heard anything about Donovan? She sighed. Samantha, you need to move on. He has. I know. With Rachel, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. They're engaged, Alyssa said flatly. He proposed last weekend. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. Engaged after just 6 months together. We'd been together for 1.5 years, and he'd never even hinted at marriage. I watched her walk away, and the full weight of what I'd lost settled on my shoulders. Not just Donovan, but my friends, my respect, my trustworthiness. All sacrificed because of my pride and insecurity. For the first time, I had to admit to myself that maybe I really was the problem, that my so-called test wasn't just harmless curiosity, but a manipulative power play that revealed more about me than it ever did about him. But even then, the realization came with excuses. If only he'd understood what I really meant. If only he hadn't overreacted. If only he'd given me another chance. I still couldn't fully own it. I couldn't accept that the consequences, the loneliness, the damaged reputation, the lost friendships were all mine to carry. And that's why, 6 months later, I'm still alone, watching life move on without me. Donovan is building a real future with Rachel. My friends have moved on to healthier relationships. My career is stalled because my reputation for dishonesty follows me everywhere I go. All because I broke up with him just to see if he'd fight for me, and he didn't ask why, just walked away. In the end, that turned out to be the smartest thing he ever did. For him, not for me, never for me.